Welcome to Wild Chats. This week we're heading into the world of travel writing and some fantastically titled books by a fellow Brit, the magnificent Sophy Roberts. We're now going to dive into the world of the Lost Pianos of Siberia and a training school for elephants. And plenty more, no doubt. Sophie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Where do we find you today? Where's that amazing bookshelf that you have behind you?
I'm in Dorset, in West Dorset, which is down towards Devon, Cornwall, on the south coast of England. And I live in a beautiful little pocket valley that, for some reason, it just misses the frost. It's like one of those microclimates. So outside, in the far rim of the valley, everything is under a really bright white frost. But where I'm sitting, I can almost let a tropical tree fern from New Zealand thrive. It kind of, so it's a beautiful little spot. Yeah, it's
so you sort of
it's a place. Some of your listeners might relate to this. My husband and I have got two kids. When we bought it, I was brought up on the west coast of Scotland, and my husband found this house, and it was a complete ruin. And he said, "Will you come and have a look at it?" I said, "I was happy in our cottage where we already were." I said, "I don't want to move." And he goes, "Please come and look at it." I said, "I'll come and look at it at night." And he goes, "You're mad. Why do you want to look at it at night? It's really pretty." I said, "Because I need to check there's no other lights." And only at night can you tell if you've got neighbours too close, and that comes from.
Did you have, or have they grown closer?
No. Actually, we lost a tree earlier in the winter, and for the first time, I can see a neighbour's light up on the hill beyond. But otherwise, I can see the sea in front, and behind it's no other lights, which is really, really rare. England is a highly it's a populated place. And but on the west coast of Scotland, where I had my childhood, it was the same thing. You could dark skies. I need dark skies.
Yeah. Where were you on the west coast of Scotland? We used to holiday up there. That's where I think I cut my teeth. Mum and Dad taking us up to the Carla Lochoush and Plockton and Lochcarron, all those areas on the west coast.
Well, there you go, snap. I was in Argyll firstly, and then latterly in a place that sadly is known for really tragic reasons, but Lockerbie, after the air crash in the 90s. But my father was a farmer, and it was a really happy childhood. And my first memories were also kind of camping in the Highlands and Carla Lochoush and fishing for mackerel, dropping a line in and just pulling
exactly
100
what
up.
we did. Exactly what we did. Yeah, it's the tapestry of how we evolve and our passion for the outdoors. And people sort of say, "Oh, you travel the world now and you visit all these places," but it's those early days of what you do with your parents that maybe you gravitate away from when you become a teenager, but you sort of are drawn back to as you get older in life. And I think then bringing your kids up, you sort of bring that into their world subconsciously.
It's completely the same thing. My childhood was the west coast of Scotland and Ireland, and I remember my mother used to say, "Oh, stop complaining, it's warm rain." It was like, it was still rain. But where I live now in Dorset, at least I see this thing which I didn't think existed in the British Isles, which was a couple of months of sunshine.
But I also know, I think you're down where the Gulf Stream comes across, hence why you can grow those almost the tropical ferns and things down there. I spoke to Mum and Dad who are in Surrey, in Guildford, about an hour before I spoke to you, and they said they'd had their first flakes of snow. And I looked at it and it was just as green, the grass as normal, with just the frost on it. But as soon as snow arrives in the UK, it's like, oh my God, we got the snow.
No, it's a huge thing, and it's rare in this bit. This Gulf Stream comes over and just like warms the land, and so you get these beautiful microsystems with the plants that will thrive. I'm really interested in it because it's a book I'm working on. My third book is down in the southwest coast of Ireland, Kerry, and that has the same. It's like kind of magical. You feel like it's almost like a lost world when climatically you're tucked inside this hollow where something else is happening. It's a very comforting feeling. I love it.
So you're there basking in the microclimates of a non-snowy, non-frosty little vale, which is wonderful. We are on a rainy December day, not having had that much of a summer in Queensland yet. Yes, we're on, the temperatures are up there at 24, 28, 29, but it's been grey and it's been raining. And I fly out to Norway in 3 days' time. I take a trip to the north of Norway, and I was looking at the forecast earlier, minus 25 up there. So when we talk about real cold and real snow, we're going from the mild for you, the silly hot and humid down here, to the cold of Norway. Isn't the world a wonderful place when you can just sort of talk across it and find all these different places?
Yeah, it is. And I think it gets to the heart of adventure for me anyway, which is this feeling of extremes. The extremes is kind of my adrenaline. I've never heard this word. We all know the word xenophobia.
Yeah.
Xenophilia. Have you ever heard that word? Which means
No.
it means a love of the stranger. And
Right.
isn't that a beautiful
Xenophilia. That's
thing?
a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. So the kind of the love of otherness, and that includes the kind of extremes of topography, of climate, of culture. That's what I'm kind of drawn to. So yeah, from you going from Queensland to Arctic Circle, you're going north of the Arctic
400
Circle.
kilometres into it. Yeah. 400 kilometres
Amazing,
in, right at the
amazing,
top of
amazing.
Norway. Yeah. So pretty
Amazing. Well, I
dark.
must tell you,
Hopefully
I've
Northern
just been
Lights.
reviewing a book actually, which you have to get hold of,
Yeah.
called Frost Lines. It's coming out any minute.
Okay.
It's all about the Arctic.
I'm going to
Well,
put it
I'm not going to
on
say what I
my
think
little
because I've got
list.
to review
Frost
it, but
lines.
it's good.
Oh, there we are. HarperCollins, that one. Journey Through Entangled Lives and Landscapes in a Warming Arctic by Neil Shea. Is that the one?
Yeah, Nat Geo author.
Got it.
Super
Yeah, wonderful.
interesting.
Oh, this is always good. This is the beauty of these podcasts. I was speaking to Lucy Bartholomew earlier today, and she was telling me about this different training plan. I was talking to Rolf Potts earlier on. He gave me some ideas. It's the nice thing about sort of opening up the brains of other people and finding out what makes them tick as well. But if no one from this audience knows what makes you tick, Sophie, I would love for you for a minute just to sort of turn to the audience and say, people that are meeting you for the first time, what do you do, and what are the places in the world that you're drawn to?
So I'm a writer, an author, and journalist. It's what I've always done, is what I trained in. And from my first part of my career, I worked for the kind of glossy travel magazines, where the money was, not necessarily for the journalist, in fact, not at all for the journalist, but for the consumer, the customer. And I did it for a period of time, and it had a most peculiar effect. It gave me, for the first time in my life, an opportunity to really travel and see the world. But the world I was seeing felt like a kind of almost like it was just hollowed of meaning. It was rich, it was wealthy, it was flashy, it was glamorous, but it just meant I couldn't feel anything in these places. It was all hotel led, resort led, destination led, and the only thing I could really feel was the rapid effects of over tourism. And so I pulled away from it. I pulled away from it in a really dramatic way, and I quit a good job. I was working for a magazine in America at the time.
Mm.
It came after a period of time in Mongolia where my husband had been working, and I was there with my young family, and I was like, bugger this, I'm going to live the life I want to live as a writer. And I started on my first book. Each book takes me about 5 years. That book was called The Lost Pianos of Siberia. And then I've just finished another one, which was in East and Central Africa. But the core of it is this. I am drawn to that thing we started this conversation with. I'm drawn to the far away. I'm drawn to the thing that I don't already think or believe, but I'm drawn to the ideas that will prompt me to see the world a bit differently. And that is a kind of a cultural and intellectual and also a physical experience for me. And I'm also drawn to like the really big questions in history, the really big things that have happened in history, like the repression of political prisoners through the Tsarist exile system in Russia, and then the gulags under Stalin and all the rest of it. Over 2 million people killed in that system in 100 years. And how do you get readers into that space? How do you tackle those big stories? And it's the same with my Africa book. How do you tackle Leopold's Congo? King Leopold II of Belgium, he committed extraordinary atrocities, millions and millions of people in Congo when he made it his own private domain. How do you tackle those? So I take contemporary journeys and I weave them with the history in order to create narratives that might trick a few people into getting into the space of confronting difficult things, but through the spirit of adventure and a contemporary kind of discovery. So I'm still a journalist. I work frequently for the Financial Times, a little bit for the Wall Street Journal here and there, and I still do journalism, but it's a more serious kind of journalism than it was when it was just luxury hotels.
Yeah, which almost, I suppose, seems very It's hard, isn't it? Everybody strives to go on these Instagram style adventures where there's perfection oozing from every single image and it's the perfect light and the perfect scenario. But the truth of travel isn't like that. I mean, Rolf was talking earlier on today about the fact that the journeys he loves are almost exactly the same as you talk about, the diverse ones, the places that people don't get to. But the problem that sort of social media and the digital world is doing is it's exposing so many people to it, they want to go there. And it removes that idea of remote and makes it visited, and then it becomes more visited, and then it becomes touristy. So when you strive to find remote, do you think you look for a remote, to get in there, the access, the geography, the language, the risk? What is the thing that delivers remote for you to find these beautiful places?
Places that have difficult reputations. So if there's a difficult reputation, I'm really interested in trying to not rescue the difficult reputation by any manner of means, but try and see another side. So
Yeah.
Siberia, the largest continental prison without a roof, that's how it used to be called. It's
Wow.
just huge, 11 different time zones. It's just got huge history. It's got huge difficulty. At the time I was working for The Economist, and the cover of the magazine was Putin with with the kind of like a kind of a devil's eyes kind of idea. Do I think what he's doing in Ukraine is absolutely shocking and appalling? 100%. 100%. It's beyond imagining. But do I think everyday Russian people should be brandished by the same brush? No, I don't. Do I think Russian culture is all of that? No, I don't. So I'm interested in the counter-narrative, because I think there is a counter-narrative to everything. And that means going to places which are difficult. Russia was incredibly difficult to work in. I can't go there now. I can never go there again. Certainly not until there's huge regime changes, like so many people that have been locked out of the country. But do I think that there are other incredible, incredible people inside those borders doing amazing, brave and interesting things? Absolutely. The same with the reputation of the Congo, the DRC, this very violent place. It's all true. It's all true. But there are also other stories. There are other redemptive narratives. There are other beautiful, beautiful sides to a place that can't be just like wiped off like President Trump did in his first term of office, when he kind of, the great shitholes of the world, he called them. That was when I got that list of the great shitholes of the world. Do you remember?
That's where I'm going next. Yes.
That became my go-to list, and I went on I got on a plane to Chad. So, so remote to me is it's less necessarily about the distance from where I am to there. It's about the distance between one way of thinking and another, and how can you bridge that with nuance, not with a polarized kind of view of the world, right, wrong, left, right. The way that Instagram forces us to think, the way that modern politics can force us to think. It's like hard left, hard right. No. The world is a nuanced place of grey. That's what I'm interested in.
And it's what we are delivered and expected to believe. I mean, that you've been involved in the journalistic world, the news world for a long time. What the stories are that are going to be the clickbait or grab the headlines, they're the ones that we're fed, they're the ones we digest. And if we haven't been there to understand it, perceive it and digest it ourselves in our own first hand, we often just go with that that's what the character is of that country. And I think the countries I'd love to, and I was refused a visa to Iran. I went through Libya when Gaddafi was in power. I drove through DRC and Congo. All those countries there, exactly the ones where people go, you're stupid, you'll get beheaded, something's going to happen. They're the countries where the people have got the best stories to tell. They're the ones where they genuinely want to be friendly, to hear your story, to sit down and break the bread. It's fascinating. The ones with the most problematic leaders that the world believes and tells us are the ones that we're going to struggle in are the ones where we have the best experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't come without risk, and I mitigate and manage risk pretty carefully. I'm not nearly as brave as you, Ben, and I guess I only go into these scenarios if I know my way out. And that's my kind of basic rule. But essentially, I think that we're living in a moment in time when we are losing empathy. losing empathy, and it's partly to do with the digitization of our lives. It's partly to do with the politics that we've seen kind of bloom post-COVID with really entrenched points of view. But there's this wonderful, wonderful quote. It's a British economist, I think it was, who said it, which is, ideology is like bad breath. You can never smell your own. And that idea both amuses and haunts me. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
refuse to accept that countries I'm told are bad and dangerous are bad and dangerous. On one level, of course, because of security and all the rest of it, but not on a human level. And on a human
Yeah.
level, when you go into those places where there isn't the same noise or the same crowd or the same popularity, you also are going into places which are much less Googleable. And that's
Yeah.
another thing that's at the core of my work, is like, search for the ungoogleable. Why do I want to contribute to what AI already knows? I don't.
I
I
think you've been
want to.
reading my marketing plan for 2026 because we've got a term that we are now using for ungoogleable adventures. It's this thing where you do not want to be on the radar. You want to be as far off it as you can, but not tell so many people about it that it becomes the norm.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've. This is a real kind of like moral dilemma I have, because you write
Mm,
about places and you write about
yes.
them for big newspapers and magazines. You are contributing to their popularization. What I'm interested in is, how do you contribute to that popularization by contributing to the right people? So how's the money going into the right hands? How is that enabling and empowering lives locally? And that's really hard to work out, because the kind of the layers of commerce that sit between the person on the ground and the traveler who's coming in from overseas, there's a lot of middlemen that are making their little slice in between. That's hard to do. But I think that ultimately, I think tourism and travel and adventure are wonderful, wonderful things. But we have to approach it with levels of kind of a moral responsibility to those places. And frankly, kind of human curiosity, and that gets killed by consumption. It's this idea of travel as compassion, not just as consumption. But somehow in the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've gone into travel as consumption. That's a very different thing.
Yes.
Consume,
Yeah.
consume,
Haven't we?
consume. But how
Yeah.
about feel, feel, feel? Just feel, calm passion, to feel with. And that, to me, is the essence of the kind of trips and adventures I want to take.
I love it. You've gone from obviously a girl growing up on the west coast of Scotland, where the travel was with family, as very much it was with my upbringing. But now you sort of gone this very, very different side of what travel means to you and to the audience that you're writing for and you're listening to. What was the early days of travel like for you? Where was the independent Sophie? Where did she travel off to? Was it with friends to go backpacking? Was it more about it was on business trips? How did you sort of cut your teeth in the world of traveling before it became an income stream?
India. It was India, 16,
Yeah.
and Nepal, which is a place I go to every year. It's really close to my heart. Especially northern India, I'm interested in Buddhism, and I'm interested in that, I don't know, that Sherpa culture. I'm really
Yeah.
drawn to. I have good close friends. I feel at ease in Nepal, especially Solukhumbu,
Hmm.
east of where you spent time, I think, and Everest, in a place called Faflu. That's really special to me. But those are all my early day travel, and I just I got a feel for it, and I got into the pace of it.
Yeah.
I like the slowness of it. So yeah.
And that was then I'm going to call it selfish travel because it's all about
Yeah.
self-development and about character building and about understanding and about broadening the mind and using the world as your classroom. What was the moment you realized you were actually starting to build the skill set to drive an income from this travel?
I wish I had it right to hand. I think I do. Yeah, grab
In the
it. But my
45,000 books on hand.
No, I do. My father, this was brilliant. My grandfather left me a tiny bit of money, and
Hmm.
he was in the Navy, and he was a great traveler, and he used to tell me these amazing stories. So I took that little chunk of money, and that's what I used to go off on that year, India, Nepal, and the rest. And but my father said to me, "Don't censor yourself. I don't care if there's 10 bang lasses a day. Don't censor yourself. Just go and write me a letter once a week. And you're younger than me, Ben, but they used to have this post restaurant system where you'd write a letter on airmail paper that was folded up
Yes,
and
with the
licked. I could
edges around
still
the
lick it.
outside.
Yeah,
Yeah,
edges around
yeah.
the outside. You fold it in, and then you collect a letter at the Indian post office, at the Nepali post office, wherever it was. And so each week I wrote to my father, and he wrote back to me. So it was like I would get
I
stories from the
love
Scottish
that.
farm, and he would get my stories on the road. And I wrote it as if he was just a reader, not my father. And I got home, and my father had typed up every single letter. So I've got
Wow,
it
you had a
sitting here.
secretary early
I'll try and
on.
put it out for the end of the postcard, but he typed up every single letter. And so it became like a conversation
Yeah.
between home and away. And it became, in fact, it's the length of a book, because if you add that up 6-8 months, it's the length of a book. And I look back at it sometimes, and it's terrible writing. It's full of kind of pomposities and all the rest of it, but it is honest.
It was raw and real. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's
And I think
honest.
that's sort of lost when you're trying to fabricate a story. You're sort of trying to maybe glamorize moments. But if you're doing it like that, and you are, in a way, you're the diaries of not Anne Frank, but Sophie, and they're getting sent home. Would there ever be anything, not commercial maybe, but to go to publication with something like that?
I think I occasionally look back at it because I like comparing places. Like, for instance, last year I was on a job in Jaisalmer in the Thar Desert in Western Rajasthan, and I remember the absolute poetry of that place, and this kind of like golden ramparts, and looking out over a desert where there weren't a whole lot of travelers there, and then we spent a few nights out in the dunes, and then I went back. And it just blew my mind. You could barely squeeze through the town for tourists. And so I went back to it as almost like a witnessing, as a document of where I've been and how much it had changed.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's been kind of one use of it. Maybe I will. And I'm super interested in what makes people restless. Why am I so restless? I
Yeah.
can't, I love my home. I've got these two beautiful sons. I adore my husband. My parents live on a farm just around the corner now from where I am now. I've got two sisters in the same valley. Home is a real home here in this
Yeah.
valley. But
But
yeah,
you
I've got
need
this
to
kind
move
of
away.
so where does that itch come from? And maybe that body of letters will answer some of those questions.
I'm not sure if you can hear me. I was just going to talk through the idea that some of the guests that I've spoken to, over the last year or so, when we compare travel, I think the comparison between the first round of travel and going back and trying to do it again. I've always had this dream. So the Land Rover that sits here was bought in Bournemouth in England in 2004. I've taken it from all the way around Africa. I've done it from Singapore to London. And the dream was always that I would give it to my little boy Atlas for his 21st birthday present on the premise that we would then retrace some of our steps through Africa. The more
Amazing.
people I speak to that have done the travels and then replicate them decades later, no one seems to have had a better experience. There's always a comparison. As soon as you've got a comparison, it's a difficult thing. I think we need to forge a new path. We need to be creative. We need to say, hey, let's go and do this for the first time, because for both of us, it will be enlightening and engaging and different and new. Whereas if I go with Atlas and go, the river in Senegal, it's not as good as it was. There's more people here. Just like you said, it sort of changes your perception. So I don't know if we can take any goods out of retracing steps years or decades later,
Well,
apart from being able to compare.
it's a super interesting idea, because my second book, The Training School for Elephants, is I follow in the footsteps of another traveller's journey from 1879, a traveller I did not know, and obviously. But from incredibly detailed notes, diaries, journal entries, letters, and I can retrace that journey down to the tree.
Wow.
The
Wow.
topography
What
can be
amazing notes.
it's incredible. We think where the sort of we as humans think our lives are long, and then when you start to see how much how 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 nature sticks and how it's still there against this great kind of, this sort of cataclysmic ecological kind of crisis we're in. Nature is still there. It's still working. The trees are still there. Some of the forests are still there. The lake is still there. Lake Tanganyika. So following in the footsteps offers an incredible perspective on time and changes in time. But the bones are a really, really good one to work with. I love following in footsteps, but I don't know if I'd want to do it with a family member, because I suspect I could bore them. My mother and father used to do it in Ireland. They used to remember an older island, the island that we knew when we used to take holidays in Donegal and all the rest of it. And I remember like yawning in the back of the car going, oh God, they're just, same old
shut
story.
up and let us live in the moment. Yeah. You take me to a place in Mozambique in the Magadagali salt pans. There's an area called the Baines Baobabs, and it's these, or Baobs. There's these beautiful trees that Thomas Baines in the mid-1800s painted. He inscribed and scrawled his name, one of the early graffiti artists, and there's still visual recognition of his inscription in the tree. And that, again, it's a conveyor belt of generations of people that have come, visited, died off, sons of them or daughters of them come and visited and died off. The human turnover is huge. The trees are stalwarts. They're still there. They're still growing in the same area on the lake. So it's exactly where you sort of took me to, is that nature is going to well outlive us. And those moments on the planet where we've been to have been visited for, generations before us.
And there's a really interesting idea in that, because sometimes when it feels really far away, both in but let's say in time, space, we'll just assume it's a far away place, but when it feels really far away in time, like cave paintings, 2, 4, 10,000 years old, and you see them in place without electric light, not expecting them to even be there. This has happened to me a few times. It's like this incredible feeling. It's like the shock of proximity. It feels like it's right there, right now, and you feel like time and space collapse into something that is so visceral. It's so powerful, as if there was nothing between us and them. And that
absolutely.
is just the most
I was thinking again about
feeling.
Some of the Saharan cave paintings where, it's a dry, dusty desert that we think has been there for hundreds of thousands of years. And yet some of those cave paintings, are depicting vast migrating swathes of African wildlife, and they're depicting water birds and things like that. And that is a whole, maybe 1,000, 5,000 years away. So those paintings are almost like a virtual step back in time.
That's
to
exactly.
a moment that we can't even imagine.
You're so on the money, Ben. That's my next job, as I'm going to Tibesti in northeast Chad.
Oh, no way.
That rock art has it completely. And it is, you're absolutely right. It's a Sahara that it's alive with rhino, with elephant, with like a green Sahara, and you like, how can that be? I mean, this dry, hard place that has got so much reputational complexity, but yet you can feel human with these dancing hunters going across the face of a stone.
So that's the link between all of this time, is that the people, the Homo sapiens, the people that were there are the link that we've got. Everything else has disappeared and dried up.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful feeling. And
let's dig into it. Let's dig into this trip. I'm curious, because when I was planning my first Africa trip, and I was looking, there was a guy, and I forget his name, Chris someone, and he ran an amazing forum called Horizons Unlimited or Sahara Overland. And there was this old map, and it showed the old piracy routes across the Sahara, and Tibesti was one of those places. And I thought, oh, that's too far to the east. I'll never get that way. I'll be going through Morocco and Western Sahara and all through those areas. So tell me about the story. Tell me about the journey in the book that's going to be here.
Well, I'm jealous of you just on that. Did you get to Mali and Niger then?
Yeah.
You did?
I got into Mali, Burkina Faso, but not into Niger, no. Northern Nigeria was starting to get problematic. It was 2009 and 2008 that I was there, and it was just starting to get a little bit difficult.
Well, it's really tricky. And on that note, I've just finished another book by a woman called Judith Scheel called Shifting Sands, A Human History of the Sahara. What a book. You will love it. And it takes all of that deep history up into the present day and the politics of that particular kind of checkerboard, which is the Saharan and the Sahel. But I've been to Chad a couple of times. I worked originally in a place called Zakuma down in the south. about their elephant population there and the conservation work they were doing. And it was kind of amazing because it was early days. It's a protected area. The Chadian government had gone into a joint agreement with a big NGO called African Parks. And at the time, these elephant populations were being really hammered by the Janjaweed coming in from
Yeah.
Sudan and elsewhere. And so much so that the elephants would go into almost like a water going down a plug hole, like a whirl. And the adult females would circle and circle and circle every time you approached and keep their young in the middle to protect them. So it was it was like frantic, panicked behavior coming from this elephant population because it'd just been so heavily poached. And now go there, and the result of that conservation work is that those elephants are spread out. They're relaxing. They're not having to. Their behavior has kind of gone back to how it should be. So that was my first experience, and it was a magical place, and a kind of a good news narrative as well of a turnaround. And then after that, I met a guy in a bar who was in N'Djamena, the capital. And he was completely fascinating. He pulled out a map. He had been brought up in the Sahara, and he was Italian. His parents were both doctors. He was born in the same year as me, 1973. And he, living at the time, until he was about 3 years old, living in Nairobi in Kenya, where they were both doctors. And then they thought, we need to kind of get home back to Italy for a life with a child. And so they started driving north. You'll love this story, Ben, in a Land Rover. But they got to the Sahara and they basically never left.
Oh my goodness.
And Rocco was raised in the Sahara. Rocco Rava is his name. He's a complete desert specialist. He's exceptional. And I went with him just before COVID to the Anedi Desert, which is where the big rock arches are in Chad. And we worked together for a week or so, and I got this kind of massive bug for the rock art and the kind of culture there. It just felt like another planet to me. And no
one else there. I'm assuming very, very few people that even venture to Chad, and then very few that venture past there to get to somewhere like you're going to.
No, there's no one else. No one else. I mean, they have expeditions and overlands and things going, but no one else. And apart from the local communities who Rocco is heavily embedded with, he's raised up there, so he knows what he's doing. And then, but the Tibesti are even further north and more remote, and a really fascinating, kind of like a lost civilization. If you look at some of the rock art there, and these really extraordinary compass graves. I mean, it's an amazingly compelling place. A very rich in story.
I need to get back to Africa. I've got further away from Africa by living in Australia. I try and get back there. We went back in July, but it was only to take my little boy on a little safari, self-drive safari through Botswana. But every time I touch the continent, I feel alive again. I feel just that it is raw, it is challenging, the smile is genuine. You've got to live and survive as a human, whether that's, with the big five camping around you or just to get through a border post. You feel like you've got to actually take responsibility in your own hands and operate as a human being rather than being very pampered as we are in the Western world.
Yeah, and it's got a lot to do with the kind of fencelessness of the landscape. It's why I love Mongolia. It's why I love working in Siberia. Is when everything in my country is like. It's fenced and owned and identified and pocketed and categorized, and there's a hierarchy, and there's a suburb and there's a city. Everything is cut up into its little constituent parts. And when you're in those big landscapes where you can't see a fence, where you can't see a boundary, where you can't see this kind of, of course every piece of land is owned, but it has a different feeling, and it takes me back to the feeling of belonging it takes me back to feeling being an animal and not
and migrating
And
around the
that's
world.
isn't that a really, it's a really important part of traveling, is you feel like an animal. You know, you eat when you're hungry, you feel the cold, you feel the heat in ways that my life at home is really different. It's like, you know, it's the 2-3 meals a day. It's the rhythm.
The simplest one that we do is operate with the hours of the sun, because we stay up late, we work late, we get up after the sun's up. To operate as a cave dweller would have done, or animals will do. They're changing in their ecosystem they're in. The ones that are night dwellers are going to bed as the sun's coming up, and everything else is awakening as the sun comes up. And for humans, for us, when we go to these places, I feel that's how I start to get back in tune with the planet. If it's dark outside, our lives could be at threat, so we go to bed. And when the sun comes up, it's our opportunity to hunt or to feed or to do something else. So that's the easiest way to dip back into a nomadic lifestyle, and Africa delivers that in realms.
Yeah, it's space and time. Space and time have become so twisted. I mean, just by the device we hold in our hand, you think you're seeing the world through the lens of Instagram, but you're not. You're not.
Mm.
You can't feel it.
So when you're starting a story, you sound like you go there with a bit of a purpose, a destination you're going to. Or is it about the place? Is it about the person, a Rocky? Is it about a question that you need to answer? Is there something you're obsessive about? What creates that start point for a new piece of literature?
Robert Frost, poet. A poem begins as a lump in the throat. I think that's a beautiful way of saying it. It is a bitch. It's the itch. It's the lump in the throat. It's the question. It's so always. The other side, the other thing that brings me to a place I have to have a purpose. I have to have that instinct, if you like. But if you put the wrong things together, something interesting happens. It's like metaphor. Metaphor is putting the wrong things together, and so you see something new, fresh, completely alive again. That's how language works. So the idea of the lost pianos in Siberia, piano is like this cultured bourgeois instrument belonging to high culture in Siberia, a place that's got a reputation as a prison and a hellhole. Like, put the wrong things together, something interesting happens. A training school for elephants. Like, what the hell? Elephants are wild creatures. A training school? What are you talking about? So put the wrong things together, and then you create this kind of space where something unpredictable, the ungoogleable, can happen. That's what I'm interested in. So it begins as a lump in the throat. It's a hunch that there's something there. And then I try and find two things that don't quite add up. And in so doing, you have a journey that is also a journey of the imagination, not just a physical endeavor of trying to get from A to B, which I love. But it has to be more than that.
And do you juggle these titles? Would you suddenly come upon them, or are they a work in progress for many, many days leading up to months of progressing it, and then you're trying to work out how on earth you get it to be a hook?
Yeah, I mean, there is, like, for instance, there is always there's a foundation here, so that does make more sense to these metaphors, as we'll call them. So the Lost Pianos of Siberia, if I just give you that anecdote to start with. I was in Mongolia. I was in an area called the Orkhon Valley, far, far west of Ulaanbaatar. Used to take 2 days to get there. Now it takes about 8 hours with a new road that's going there. Super beautiful, with these very ancient 5,000-year-old stones standing in the middle of this kind of steppe landscape. And in the middle of that steppe landscape, there was a ger, one of these Mongolian tents, felted tents. And inside that ger, there was a young woman playing a piano, a young Mongolian pianist called Ogder El-Sampil-Nurov, who was playing a piano. And she had there gathered with her about 20 people who were all sitting, listening, herders. And a friend of mine who's German, who married a Mongolian woman who came from that valley. That's why I was there. And we were listening to this girl play. She was playing Bach. It was night. Up above, talk about dark skies. Just the stars, the smoke coming up from that fire in the middle. And we're sitting, listening to this woman playing Bach on this piano. And my German friend, I'm like crying. It's so beautiful. I lean over to my German friend. I've never heard anything so beautiful. And he goes, that piano is not worthy of her talent. You must go and find her one of the lost pianos of Siberia. And he gave me the phrase, and the phrase stuck. I was like, What is he
Yeah.
talking about?
Talking about, yes.
What is he talking about? But he knew, because he was German, he was very musical and also a very, very brilliant man. He'd worked as a filmmaker and he understood odd ideas could become something. He knew that just across the border in Siberia from Mongolia, there was a huge tradition in pianos and a huge tradition in making pianos, but also making amazing music. Of course, the Russian composers of the 19th, early 20th century. So he knew that the next best piano was not in Mongolia, where there's more horses than there are people, but across the border in Russia. So go and find her one of these pianos. And that stayed with me. So about 6 months later, I managed to get an assignment working in the Russian Far East, and something else happened. And I was like, there's something in this idea. There is something in this incredible history of the piano in Siberian and Russian culture in the last 150 years. And there is a beautiful musician who was, she was trained in Italy, this Mongolian I'd been listening to, and she didn't have a piano good enough for her talent. So that became the mission. And I spent 5 years. And it was an incredible thing because you knock on doors in the middle of the Yamal Peninsula, you'll be waving there from Norway up in the Arctic Circle. You knock on a door there, you knock on a door in Kamchatka, you knock on a door on the shores of Lake Baikal, and you say, I'm British, I'm a journalist. Do you have a piano? What is what are you? You're a musician. Tell me about your life. Tell me about why music matters to you, which is what I'm really doing.
Yeah.
Everything opens up. You're no longer the journalist with
stranger
Putin on
that's
the
just
cover of a
walked in.
magazine.
Yes.
You suddenly found this common ground, and you open up the top board of a piano, and you're actually opening up people's lives, because music can talk to what words cannot. It's completely transcendental in that respect. It's a very, very powerful mechanism to pull people together, like dance. And so that the Lost Pianos of Siberia starts with an idea and a phrase, and then it becomes this narrative with massive amounts of momentum that builds and builds and builds as I've managed to kind of explore what is really also about very difficult history.
You must have had so many of these pinch yourself moments. I mean, the Western, is it the Altai Mountains out there on that side of Mongolia? Is that as far across as you were?
I know I
that
went
sort
right
of
to
area from
Kamchatka. I went to
researching.
the Commander Islands. I went to the Kuril Islands. The Kuril Islands, which are come up from the north of Japan. In fact, Russia and Japan are the only two countries that haven't signed a treaty since the end of the Second World War because of the Kuril Islands. They're amazing.
These moments of under those stars in the Gers with the people of extraordinary talent was part of the journey to physically deliver the piano, to get to the musician, or was that just a sort of a metaphor of the journey that you're undertaking yourself?
It's mostly a metaphor, but you can, you don't want to give the ending of the book to the podcast listeners.
Otherwise, they're not going to get you. Absolutely, read for yourself.
They're not going to get there, but there's a real adventure in there. I was taken in by the Russian authorities in the Altai Mountains because they couldn't believe that I was there doing what I was doing. I was interviewed by the FSB for 8 hours.
It was a cover story, wasn't it? Must have been a cover story.
I was careful because it was like I wanted to work there. I wasn't there for political reasons. I was there to write a book about culture. And so I had to keep on going back. I eventually had my visa taken away. But luckily it was taken away when I was in the UK, not when I was in Russia. And so but it was an honest endeavor. I love that country. I love that country. I love that country, and I love the people. And it breaks my heart what's happening now in Ukraine. But
and the betrayal of the Russian nation more than anything, when it is the people at the top that are causing and delivering all the grief that's going on. There's a difference, obviously, in the field when you're working as a journalist and when you're working as a researching author. A day in the field, generically, what does it take for you? What equipment are you taking with you? How are you recording in notes? How are you memorizing these assets that are going to be used later in your journalistic or writing career?
Oh, so many ways. So on that, because I'm just going to take a tour of my office while I let the dog back in, I'm going to grab a few things while I wait there.
Absolutely. You're tuning into Wild Chats. I'm currently in conversation with Sophy Roberts. Some fascinating titles of some books. Do yourself a favour, get online, Google Sophy Roberts, Sophy, and have a look at her crafts, and then we'll find out a little bit about how she captures those moments.
Okay, so how I capture, there's nothing that beats a handwritten note. And I have got hundreds and hundreds of these, one whole bookcase in another room. And it is essential to write things down, because it's in the act of, as you're there, and putting those little notes about the smells, the sounds, the feeling, the responses, they never come back to you again with the same rawness. And also, when you're writing notes, you're compressing them, and the space opens up between those compressions. When you start writing 2 years later, those spaces open up again. So I think the written note is absolutely essential. For my most recent book, A Training School for Elephants, I did really good professional sound, because the sounds of Africa, the places I was spending time on, especially Lake Tanganyika. Have you spent time on Lake Tanganyika?
I've driven up the coast of it, up the eastern side, yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, Lake Tanganyika is like, the second deepest lake in the world after Lake Baikal in Siberia, two things they have in common, and freshwater lake. And it has this kind of like, it's got this extraordinary kind of echo to its kind of soundscape. It feels like another planet, Lake Tanganyika. And the first time I ever spent time there, again, it was like towards the beginning of this book. It was like the sound of Lake Tanganyika got me. The other thing that I feel really powerfully when I'm working in East and Central Africa is the sound of song. And the sound of song in the villages and the communities and in the churches was hugely important to me. So I worked a lot with really professional audio when I was doing that particular book, because I wanted the audio to be part of it. And they've wound it into the Penguin audio book that they've produced.
Oh, okay. That was the next question. How on earth are you portraying that sound in the written word? But it is then obviously in different formats.
It's used in formats from a almost like a commercial point of view, but from a sort of a creative point of view, I like working to the sound. So I'm writing the chapter on Lake Tanganyika. If I've got 2 hours of recording of Lake Tanganyika in a storm, it's just playing in the background. That's better than, Eurythmics. It's not actually. I love Eurythmics, but it's good. It's a very good space to take me back. The soundscape really matters to me. Other things that I do when I'm in the field to make, I work with I love working with photographers. And one of the things that I think has been a really bad thing to happen to my industry is that they ask the journalists to take the pictures. And that's putting really good photographers out of work.
And it's two totally different jobs
two
being
totally
melded into
different
one.
jobs.
Yeah.
And if you're doing your job well, which for me is writing and reporting, I don't have time to pick up a camera. I just don't have time to do it. I am a trained photographer. I did a master's in photography, but I do not want to pick up a camera when I'm...
Have you kicked back on people that try and request that from you? Have you sort of got that credibility now where you can say, hey, I'm here for this. Don't I suppose don't dilute the effect of what I can do.
Absolutely. And the really good guys get it. They totally get it. And, what makes it even more difficult is the photographer I do most of my work with, Michael Turek, wonderful American-British fella. He shoots everything on film.
Brilliant. It's weird. So film is so a young person's game again these days. We take our trips. We just come back we did a trek through Nepal. We did one into the Ruwenzori Mountains in Africa. And the two youngest people, two 18-year-olds, both brought film cameras and were worried about taking the films through through the X-ray machines and customs. It was so lovely to see their care and their need to set up a photo properly. Film is such a wonderfully lost art.
Yeah. And working with Michael was really special because most of my stories are driven by the people I find and the stories they tell. This is really important. My books are not about me, moi. You won't get any memoir in. I'm not giving you any kind of like past trauma that I'm trying to get over as I'm, traveling across Russia. Zero. Mine is I'm a conduit for other people's stories. That's what a journalist is. And so sometimes you can spend a day, 2, 5 days gaining somebody's trust where they're going to tell you their story and they are willing to share it, not just to you, but to a much wider audience. Michael Turek, this photographer I work with, will literally wait for that moment. And we know each other like a brother and sister. I know that we've got that person talking and there's going to be a glance of light that's going to come through that window and it's going to slice through those green eyes and make them come alive. He looks at me, I look at him, takes the picture, sometimes one picture a day. And that comes from slowing right down, being in place, being present with that person, honoring the story that they've had the dignity and bravery and the courage to share,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
capturing it with Michael. I mean, you've got to look at his work. Michael Turek, it is so humane. It's so humane. And I think it is partly to do with the way that his tool slows him down. You know, so many people are carrying these digital cameras. I mean, I use a digital camera. I shoot a lot really fast. And then I've got my head in the back of the screen when I'm on the train coming back from wherever I'm going or where I'm going to. And my head's in the back of the screen instead of watching the trees moving past. It's a totally different psyche. So I'm all
It
for
sounds like
film.
the relationship is such an integral part of building the confidence with the subject, building confidence with the people you're talking to, whether that's, you know, officials on a border, whether that is coming to finally the person that you've been seeking out to unwrap the stories of Rocky taking you to the cave art. When you go into these countries yourself, when you go and try and find these people, are you doing all of the work, the lead up work yourself? Have you got someone that does it for you? Do you find a fixer in country? How do you get your conduit into the place?
So interpreters are vital. I tried to learn Russian. I couldn't learn it quick enough, and I'm not a very good linguist in order to be responsible with the nuance of
Yeah.
people's stories. So I spent
Yeah.
a long time getting the right researcher, the right interpreter, who do a lot of research at the same time on the ground. Those people have to have. I mean, I move at a pace, by which I mean when I'm in place, I sleep little, I work hard. I've got books don't pay the kind of money where you can swan it. You know, I sleep cheap, rough, and it means you have to have a physical resilience, and that physical resilience has to be matched by your interpreter, because you're like each other's echo for days and days and days. So if one drops and the other one's carrying on, it doesn't quite work. So that energy has to be completely attuned. I go in with the hunch, the lump in the throat, and then I work it out on the ground. And it's very frustrating sometimes for people that I have worked with. I never ever pre-book the next night. I find that
Okay.
oppressive. I find it claustrophobic. I even find it claustrophobic in
Wow.
my own family holidays. It's like
Yeah.
I hate knowing where I'm going to end up that night, which is quite difficult in Europe, for instance. But
Yes.
that I've carried over from my kind of work as on the road. Is I hate pre-booking.
Sounds like you're the original lastminute.com, the old website in the
Yeah,
UK of booking everything with 24 hours or less to go. Sounds like the perfect
yeah.
combination for
I
you.
mean, I get that, I know when I'm going in and I won't know when I'm going out, usually. Although I try as hard as I can, unless it's a really punishing price difference, to have a ticket with a changeable flight return. But that flexibility, that movement, I want to be able to move like water. I want to be able to move with the story. And so the interpreter I work with has to be able to do the same. And I have been very fortunate. It took me 5 times to get the right person in Russia. I was
Yeah.
really fortunate with this guy called Remtula Nasari, who I worked with in Tanzania, and who on a training school for elephants, who was just magical and understood it perfectly. Sometimes gender comes into play. There's different moments where being female can create a different atmosphere to having a male interpreter, and especially in places, Russia is a very patriarchal culture. The men are strong, so how do you work with that with an interpreter? Those kind of dynamics you have to think about. But
It's
yeah,
all
I
about
tried.
relationships, isn't it? It really is so much. So the work you've got to do in the lead up to get the right story, to have the story translated in the right way. There's so much to get it there before it's even in your palm to be able to convey it in the way you want to.
Yeah. Oh, it's a lot of work. It's a lot
Yeah.
of work. And I'm at the front end of another one now, and I'm always at the end of them. I say to my husband, "Never let me do that again. Am I crazy?"
The
And
Stephen Redgrave moment in the boat after the 5th Olympic medal, isn't it? It's, "Don't you ever show me a bloody boat again," I think were his quotes.
yeah, Dad,
But
don't
then he
never
goes
let me
back.
do that. But
And
it's
we've micro unwrapped the Lost Pianos. The Training School for Elephants. Just sort of give us what that was all about and how that came to the
so
story.
weirdly, it was in 2015, that very same year, that I had heard that phrase in the 10 went in Mongolia. I'd also been working in the eastern DRC, northeast DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, up on the border with what is now known as South Sudan, in an area called Garamba, which is, it was a pretty brutal time up in Garamba. You had Joseph Kony, who was the Ugandan with the LRA child soldiers coming in. They were causing all kinds of like violent havoc across that region. The elephant populations were being decimated. What there was left of them, the evidence of them being shot in the back by helicopters. It was that bad. And when I was working there, I encountered this really strange kind of pocket of we'd flown in, and I was doing this conservation story for a magazine, and there was this like weird sort of deserted avenue of trees with these big stones where elephants had once been tethered. So captured elephants had been tethered on chains, and there were a few kind of European-style colonial buildings. And what it was an abandoned training school for elephants when King Leopold II of Belgium had tried to train the African elephant in order to extract the resources, which we all know later in the day was rubber, but originally there was a huge ivory trade going on, the irony of elephants carrying out their ivory. So he needed a transport system at the time, no roads, no railways. So if you could make the elephant work in Africa like the elephant worked in India under its cousin Queen Victoria's empire in Myanmar, then Burma, India, Sri Lanka, etc., then woohee ho, you can take it all out. So I saw that abandoned school for elephants. It haunted me, and I went back to it after COVID, after I finished Lost Pianos of Siberia, and I thought, what is that idea? That is just the weirdest idea. And it took me deep into the archives to an expedition of 1879, which is so early. That's 5 years before the Treaty of Berlin, Conference of Berlin, when Africa was cut up into all its constituent parts for under colonization. And so 1879, he had commissioned an expedition of 4 Indian elephants with 13 Indian mahouts to walk from the east coast of Africa. They were shipped in across the Indian Ocean from Mumbai, shipped in, and then walked across the continent to Lake Tanganyika in order to start the first training school for elephants in 1879. So I retraced that journey, and it's a metaphor for how we reach for another continent's resources through some of the most absurd, inhumane schemes on Earth.
Isn't it interesting? So that's, late 1800s. It seems like so many lifetimes ago, but even now, and I'm going back to 2008, driving through Mozambique and driving through Zambia and areas like that, where there were these beautiful, incredibly asphalted, flat tarmac roads where the Chinese ore trucks were going from the ports in and doing exactly that, taking the resources out, the modern day elephants. And the only things that were using these roads were these massive imported Chinese trucks with Chinese drivers and men on donkeys taking their carts to market because it was easier than using the dusty tracks. And it's almost, 250 years later, there is a very, very similar trade going on now with the elephants being mechanized.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same. It's exactly the same route. The first route was a route that the porterage was human. It was the enslaved.
Wow. Yeah.
King Leopold II of Belgium and all his little special friends said, "Oh, we're really against slavery." I mean, the hypocrisy of that is just astounding, since we don't just come out of the Atlantic slave trade ourselves, as in Brits. And we got to men can't carry all this booty out of Africa. We must use animals instead.
Something else, yes. Yeah,
and,
make it a bit more
and it's on exactly the same route that there is now a highway too. So it's a fascinating set of layers. And what I like doing as a writer is the reader can connect those dots. Reader can, I don't want to preach to the reader what is happening. You show, you show, and then the dots start to join, and you start to see that we're not so very different from these people that we take such huge moral superiority over in terms of our ancestors who did terrible things. You know, what's the crime of our time? We
That
know
we'll look
that.
back on in 100 years' time.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, what do you reckon? You see the world, you travel. Like, what's the crime of our time right now? I mean,
Good
aside from
Lord.
the obvious and wars and all
Yeah,
the
the
rest
ones
of
that are
it.
hitting us in the face and everything else, that's human loss
Yeah.
of life. But I think I don't know, maybe the crime is the belief that climate change is something that humans can actually affect and we can lessen our footprint. I was on the Great Barrier Reef a week ago with an amazing gentleman called Peter Gash and his wife Julie. They run the most sustainable eco resort on the Great Barrier Reef. And Pete, for the last 15 years I've known him, has been a firm believer in lessening our footprint, in solar power, in taking away diesel generation for the sake of trying to lessen our footprint on the planet as human beings. There's got to be some good to all of that. But his mindset has gone even now in the last 2 or 3 years to, climate change is inevitable. We are trying to fossilize a moment in time and believe that everything should be as it is today. And the world will and will continue to evolve well beyond past our time here as human beings. And is the crime the belief that climate change, I love the planet, I love doing the best I can to look after the planet, but is the crime maybe that climate change is something that we've been sold, and the fact is we can't do that much about it? We can better ourselves as humans, we can make ourselves greener and more sustainable, but is that something where maybe we just got on the train of belief with that one?
I don't know. I'm going to think about that one. I don't know. I think it's really interesting. The one that I came out of this book, A Training School for Elephants, feeling could be the crime of my generation, is how we treat animals. I eat meat. I'm not a vegetarian. But the cruelty that we've inflicted on our animal kind and continue to do so is astounding.
With
And
the
I
mass
sometimes,
farming?
yeah, just, I've fallen in love in this book with the four Asian elephants that have walked across Africa for the idea of a king in Brussels who never even visits the continent. I fall in love with these animals, and that is just as I fell in love with Russians in the Lost Pianos book. By the time I'd finished it was like, my God, how we treat animals, how we treat animals needs a really profound rethink. It's not something I'm preachy about, but it's the thing that is haunting me as a crime potentially of my generation. Yeah, haven't
When
worked it out.
you're creating, when you're carving these stories, when you're digging out some of the sort of historic archives of routes to retrace and journeys to look at again, how do you sort of verify the parts of this? Is it just scriptures and manuscripts that have come from museums? Where does the originality of this research come from?
It's a combination. For a training school for elephants, I am working with actually a researcher here in the UK, transcribed about 500,000 words of historical archive from multiple, I think we use 50 different archives all across the world, also working in multiple languages. So there was a heavy historical line there. But again, it comes, this thing of where it comes alive, the shock of proximity is you verify like you verify as a journalist. You cross-check and cross-examine
Yeah.
and see where things align and all the rest of it, and you do it with a relatively critical eye. But where it becomes alive and the kind of storytelling I'm interested in is when that history suddenly like thunders into the now. And a perfect example was right at the beginning of A Training School for Elephants. I was working in the Zanzibar archives in Stone Town, on the island of Zanzibar off the east coast of Tanzania. And I'd been in there for a few days and I'd discovered a bishop's diary of these 4 elephants coming in on the ship from India, the Chinsura, and this bishop being kind of pissed off because the elephants were causing such a fanfare that nobody was paying attention to the incredible news that on June the 7th, 1879, he was ordaining the first ever Black East African deacon, who was formerly he was a guy called John Sweddy, and so he was annoyed because nobody was
You got
coming to
news
the
bumps,
church to
yes.
celebrate with him. So I thought, that's interesting. It's a paragraph. So I went down to the church, a small church about 5 miles outside of Stone Town, where this ordination would have occurred, just to get a description of the brickwork, whatever, something small. And I arrived, and there was an older gentleman in the graveyard washing and drying his clothes on the gravestones. And I introduced myself, and he got a big brass key, and he said, I'll show you the church. I'm the caretaker. He took me in, went into this church, and it was beautiful. It was simple. And he starts telling me there's little birds flipping in and out of the windows. It was so beautiful. And he starts talking to me. He was in his 80s. And I said, well, I was there in more detail. And he said, oh, John Sweddy. He was my great uncle. I remember sitting on his lap as a child. I remember his voice. This is how he dressed. This is how he wore his kanzu. And this guy from 1879 just comes thundering into the room. It's like a ghost crawling down my back. Yeah. It was the most extraordinary feeling. So when you say, how do you verify? You think 1879 is a long time away. It's not. Oral memory in that part of the world is huge. That was just straightforward human oral memory that suddenly made it all come alive. And to me, that was the moment I thought, right, this book is completely possible now. It's not just I'm not interested in just writing like straight history books. I'm interested in that weave of past and present and that shock of proximity. It is time and space fold into each other when you're in the perfect zone traveling. You know that. You felt that in the Himalayas when you've been on, like you feel the spirit of place, the true spirit of place. You feel the history of place. You feel the culture of place. You feel you and your Scottish holidays all like falling into one moment in time. And it's the most incredible feeling. And that was it for me.
I think that has probably hit me the hardest, maybe not so much on the travelled internationally, but having been to some of the more historic First Nations places in Australia, some of the Torres Strait Islands, and meeting the elders there and going to their special places that are, again, they're away from the beaten track. They're not touristy. They're not visited. They're hard to get to, and what that difficulty brings is the uniqueness of experience. I think that has resonated more for me in some of these parts of Australia than it has done in many other parts of the world. Maybe I just haven't looked, and I've done it through a travel explorer with other people along for the rides perspective, as opposed to you going out there and forging this sort of path for yourself and uncovering and unwrapping things. And maybe they come to you a little bit more in those places. Curiosity. It's a big one because obviously you're an extremely curious person to go out there and strive to find these places. The Chad adventure, is that the next part of the curiosity that's going to lead to the next book?
It's a part of it. It's a part of it. I'll probably spend about a year kind of working out how to structure something. Structure is the difference between an article and a book. How do you create momentum across 80,000 words with a threaded narrative? So again, that idea of the deep past being very present. That's the core of an idea. But how do I thread that across some of the geographies I'm really interested in, the places I'm interested in? I'm not quite sure yet. So it takes, I think I'm a bit crazy, actually. Yeah, I think I'm a bit crazy because it's like, it doesn't quite add up and I remember really funny when I was trying to get a mortgage extension here, and the financial advisor came over and he said to me and my husband, he was sitting at the kitchen table, and he said, right, well, how are you going to pay it back? And my husband, he makes dry food for adventures. He has a company that makes dehydrated, organic, very healthy food for adventures. Yeah. And so
what's the company, out of curiosity? This is not a plug, I'm just curious.
It's called Firepot.
I knew it was going to be Firepot. I just looked at their Christmas lunch one that they do. We're going to Norway, and we were using their Norwegian ones, and I almost bought 11 of the Christmas ones to take to Norway for the special adventure. I knew it was going to be Firepot. How brilliant!
Yeah. So that's Firepot. So he says to the mortgage advisor, he goes, well, I'm drying food, and he's like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. It's like a mad sort of dehydration technology that he's developed and all the rest of it. And the mortgage advisor looks at him and goes, no, just it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Then he goes, try my wife then. And he looks at me and he goes, "What you could do?" So I'm looking for a piano in Siberia. And he was just like, "Why have you even wasted my time?"
So, yeah, exactly. You guys, there's no way you can bring in income from what you do. What on earth is it? The suited man with the 1 and 0 opinions on everything. I love it.
Yeah, well, I wish sometimes that I have more control over my curiosity. But yeah, it's curiosity is, I think, absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing, and I encourage it in my kids, and I work with it when I teach, and it's the thing I most dread losing. I never
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
because, but you know, curiosity is the precursor to wonder, is it not? And
Lovely. That's a great one. Yeah.
to lose
And
wonder
wonder
is
is what
the
the
end of
world's all
everything.
about. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Is 2026 teeing up to be a year of travel or a year of study or a year of writing? What's the first
No,
part looking like?
I've got a couple of things. I'm teaching. I do one teaching retreat a year, and I'm doing one back in the Solid Kumbu in this place Faflu, which I do once a year, working with Michael Tourette, the photographer, and I love that. And we're going up to Mustang as well to spend some time there. So that's for travel writers and photographers interested at working at quite a sophisticated level, really, and pushing some of those spaces. And then I'm going to spend some time in the west coast of Ireland and in the Sahara. I've got 2 or 3 jobs coming up in the Sahara, which I'm
I'm
really,
so
really
jealous
fascinated
about that
by.
part. I'm
Mm.
so jealous. If you can find me a container, if you can find me the funds to get the Land Rover across, Colonel Mustard will come across and we'll come and join you for it.
Is that Colonel
How do
Mustard
we?
behind you?
This is Colonel Mustard. This is Colonel Mustard that was bought in England on the 24th of April 2004 and has been with me now for 22 years. 40 years old in April, this old boy. And then this is
Amazing.
the sort of more modern Ineos Grenadier that's sort of a little bit more reliable for the corporate stuff that we do. So I love having the sort of the portfolio of the older and the new right here as well.
And that's a Bournemouth Landy, is it?
Yeah, it gave up on the A31 as I drove it from Bournemouth to Winchester to take it home to then start the idea of building it for 3 years into a journey, into a vehicle I was going to live in for a year. And it gave up so catastrophically. The engine was almost on fire after about 10 kilometres that the fire brigade that were going back from another job came back to me on the edge of the hard shoulder and said, "Are you okay? Do we need to put a fire out?" And I said, "No, it'll get home." And then that's lived with me forever. It's changed the engine, changed the gearbox, changed everything else. But this is the
Beautiful
original
car.
Colonel Mustard, yes.
Beautiful
Colonel
car.
Mustard that's might been tattooed on my leg by my little boy's drawing as well. So there is Colonel Mustard right there.
Gorgeous. Oh, gorgeous.
Oh,
They are
Sophie, it's
amazing.
wonderful. It really is wonderful to talk. It really is. Where do we find out about all of your adventures? I mean, obviously you're on Instagram and you got the website and stuff. What's your place you keep up to date?
Yeah, mostly sophieroberts.com, and also I'm really into other people's stories, not just my own. So go to gonetotimbuktu.com is the podcast that I have with lots of writers, photographers. I need to get you on, Ben. I feel
I'm
like just
just,
talking on
I'm
this.
just looking at Gone to
Gone to
Timbuktu podcast.
Timbuktu.
I'm there and I'm subscribing as we talk. This is we started the episode with what you learn from other people, and we're finishing with what you learn from other people. It's such a great portal of just opening up the knowledge bank.
I think so. I think it's so important to share. We're a small community of passionate people that try to make our living by telling stories about the travels we take and make. And by being generous to each other and to others, we're encouraging another generation to come through at the same time as giving each other audiences that are worth sharing. So thanks, Ben, for what you do. It's hugely appreciated.
Well, Sophie, thank you so much from everyone at Wild Earth, from all the Wild Earth things that have been listening to this. If you do love the chat, hit follow and share it with someone who needs a little strange adventure in their life. And if you're looking for the gear to fuel your next great idea, whether that is going on an overland journey through the Sahara, whether it is taking a journey across the Road of Bones, whatever it is, check out wildearth.com. They'll get the gear for you. And we'll see you next time for more wild stories from the trail, the road, and off the edge of the map.